Okay, good morning, everybody. It's Saturday morning, and it's 10 till 11. And the time, I guess, I was debating if I should talk a little bit. You know, I had a dream this morning. Now, I got up very late on purpose, though, because I normally get up at a good time is about 5 in the morning. And hopefully, this will be a teaching video, too. Sometimes when I have projects, when I did all the granite work in my yard out of the free granite, I showed a little bit of that. But right when I woke up, I had a dream, and the dream was the room. I have like another office in the back. It's a nice room for me, right back here. But I woke up, and the room in the dream, the room was a disaster. And I'm an organizer, and I had an extra hour yesterday, so I took one of my daughter's rooms, which I had fixed real nice, and she was going to fix it, and it was like a disaster over a period of weeks. I said, I'm going to go back and refix that. It took about an hour, so in my dream, I woke up and my back room was a total disaster, and I was mad because I don't like this organization. But then thankfully it was a dream. Then I walked into my other prayer room, and the whole ceiling pretty much collapsed. Now, I had all types of stuff on the ground. Here's what I did just a little while ago, okay? That's all and I decided to, but this would be the principle. When I saw all of that wasn't on the ground, but I realized, let me do it right. Let me prep it, because I used to paint and stuff. So let me go ahead and prep it. And I figured it would take me about an hour and a half or so if I jumped right into that project. But I have a system of prayer, even on Saturday, and I was tempted to bypass it. Because you quote scripture, you pray, it's about an hour or so. And I got up late, I said, nope, I'm going to keep that order. And then I have a few other things on Saturday. I save to my flash drives all the videos I make during the week. And I save them to one flash drive. And I have a bunch of flash drives that are filled up from videos. And then I save them to backup flash drives. But it's a system. And once you develop it, you don't have to write all those things down during the week. I got to do that. You stick with that. So I managed to actually get my whole prayer time in, do the work I did, and then start the project. And it wasn't just tearing down all the insulation, all the sheetrock. Then I went and pulled all the nails and did all the prep work. And then I thought, man, I should go buy a Wagner sprayer and finish a job. I used to have a Wagner sprayer, and I used it once or twice, and then it was rolled. I used to use spray guns. I used to be a house painter. And I got frustrated one day because if you don't clean them right, they don't work, so I threw it out. It was like a $70 Wagner sprayer. So I thought. But what's interesting, I started at 7. And then I even do a cleaning. Like I go through, do the dishes, clean, sweep, feed my animals. I got everything done, and there was no time lost. Meaning that project actually fit into my regular schedule for Saturday, and it's now just almost 3 hours. But normally that whole system of teaching and saving and everything takes 3 hours. But because I did the worship, I did the praise, I didn't cut it short. It cut 0 time into my schedule. I didn't lose hardly a minute, because it's now 5 till 11. That's a principle. The great reformer Martin Luther, he spent a lot of time in prayer. That's the 16th century, 1500s. And one time, I think like hours in prayer, possibly, if I remember. And somebody asked Luther once, you got so much you're doing, the Reformation, the many things that God was doing with Martin Luther. And they said, how do you have all that time for prayer? And Luther said, if I didn't spend so many hours in prayer, I would not be able to accomplish everything that's being accomplished. Now, right at the end, because it's a Saturday, I figured I'll go through one of my CDs, which is good teaching series by professors. You order these courses, and he's at Paul Tillich. Now, Paul Tillich is a very influential teacher, theologian, Christian teacher, thinker, philosopher. But Paul Tillich is considered by most Bible teachers in the very liberal camp. And he would describe God as the foundation of being. But Paul Tillich and what these thinkers were doing in the 1900s, we refer to them as higher critics and all. They were grappling with certain things that were coming up at the time, particularly at the German universities, and theories of, they wanted to advance Christianity to come into the modern world. And so they would embrace things like the miracles in the Bible, even the resurrection of Jesus. They would say, were not actual things that happened. Now, that's why most Christians, including myself, would reject people like Paul Tillich. Because Paul says, if you deny the resurrection to the Corinthians, he says, your faith is in vain. Paul says, if this is not true, historically, meaning Jesus did not rise from the dead, then we are all men most miserable. Which really that's a rebuke to the great Christian thinker Blaise Pascal and Pascal's wager. Which is, it's good to know Pascal's wager, but Pascal's wager was, in short, if we as Christians are doing all these things and it's not true, we're still better off than those who are atheists and don't believe in following the Lord, because we have better lives anyway. I would agree somewhat with Pascal, but Paul says if none of this is true, we're all men most miserable. So Tillich would challenge the heart and the foundation of Christianity. And then in the course, the last CD I just was going through as I was finishing the routine without a minute lost, even though that project could have been considered a half-a-day project. Tearing down stuff is easy, but I had to pull all the nails and prep everything, and it's really ready for me to spray it. I used to roll and paint, but there's a lot of nails. And so. Now, if you follow the course God gives you, and you don't neglect the prayer time, and you might think, oh, that's a wasted hour today, or any day. It's never, okay? Because God's the one that's doing whatever he's doing in your life. It is he that builds the stories in the heavens and establishes his troops upon the earth. Where is Isaiah? Where is the house that you build unto me? And where is the work of my hands? Where is the work of your hands? Have not my hands, God says, made all these things? And all these things have been. That's Isaiah. Have not my hands done everything in your life? Christian, minister, apostle, pastor, whoever. And they have been. Meaning everything that you think you're doing for God, God's doing through you. Paul says, the grace that was bestowed upon me, I labored more abundantly than all the other apostles. Yet not I, but the grace that was with me. So anything that's being accomplished in you is simply because God's grace apprehended you. Okay? And then God chose you for a purpose and a cause. We have a lot of good teachings over the centuries, and many Christians talk about the reality of community. Another great teacher, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German martyr, but he wrote well on community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So I mentioned a few historical. He was at the time of the Third Reich and Hitler, and he was a young German pastor, Protestant pastor, and he would write, and he wrote on community. He himself also, these were thinkers, okay? These were men. He was also familiar with Paul Tillich, Karl Barth, okay, because he studied also in the German universities. But it was at the time of World War II, the time of Hitler. And Bonhoeffer came to the United States and was teaching at a university in New York City. I forget which one it was, maybe Union Theological. But then he realized, he said, I need to go back and identify with my brothers and sisters in Germany. He could have stayed safe in the United States. Of course, it's 20th century, we're talking about 1900s. But he did go back. And then Dietrich Bonhoeffer was implicated in a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. And then he was put to death. And even in his death, like Socrates, while he's teaching philosophy, when Bonhoeffer was put to death, he accepted it. The story tells us he accepted it willingly. That in itself was testimony. And so he died young for the cause. So his writings, and he wrote on community. Okay, so this was the project. But whatever project God has given you, in contrast, community is true. Meaning, we often teach you can't accomplish things on your own. You can't. Think for a minute of John the Baptist when they asked him, "Who are you, John?" And John the Baptist said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert." Wait a minute, John, what do you mean the voice of one? You can't accomplish your mission. Everybody is going to give an account of themselves to God. And your calling, minister, pastor, apostle, prophet, you have to be obedient at times, and you're going to walk alone many times. There's a scripture, it might be Isaiah again. It says, look to the rock that you were cut out of. I called Abraham alone. That's, I believe, Isaiah the prophet. So God says, look to your heritage. We, according to Paul in Galatians, by faith are the children of Abraham. And so God was saying through the prophet Isaiah, look to the rock that you were cut out of. I called him alone and blessed him and increased him. So if you fulfill or want to fulfill the purpose of God, there's going to be that aloneness, all right? There's going to be you and God. Now, there's community too, meaning you're going to work with others. But if you're looking at the accountability that we give to one another, sometimes I think we've developed sort of an idol out of the accountability. The last 10 years or so, many Protestant Christians and ministers talked about be accountable to a person. So if you slip up, AA kind of has some of these principles, which is okay. But I believe the accountability thing in itself at times is idolatry. Because you're saying, oh, if I mess up, I know I got to tell my whoever I'm accountable to, a fellow pastor. And God says, I'm seeing everything. And you got to get to the point where you realize it. Say, I'm here. I'm alone with you, God. There's going to be time where the sponsor or I don't do AA, okay? But ultimately, the task that God has called you to, you grasp hold of that task. And you say, even at times, that this was a little example because I've had times in ministry over the years. Remember my friend Gabriel, who you saw on one of my videos 2 weeks ago? I remember, though, his dad, who passed away, Elias Alvarado, he was helping me in the ministry at our little home church we started, which was called Christian Outreach Ministries in Kingsville. But I remember, and I prayed and was starting a church, and I was young. And then one time Elias said, John, I'm going to leave the church that you're the pastor of. He was helping me as a song leader. He would fill in for me days at the firehouse where I had to work and I couldn't get off for those few hours on Sunday. Elias would preach. But then he was going to move on to the Victory Outreach and be a pastor and all. But I remember when he said, okay, I'm going, so it was hard because it was early on and he was one of the key helpers in our little church. And I remember thinking, oh, that was a struggle for me. Ministers, pastors, sometimes when your friends or fellow ministers move on and say, So that was, and that came to me recently. When I saw Gabriel, I remember that. I said, no, I got to keep doing the call. And we've had a lot worse things that happen over the years, but you learn that. Those are steps you take. And then God says, and when the time's ready, I'll let you go through the cross or the hard things. And those hard things are necessary for you and me. And God recognizes there are times we're not able to have. I heard a story 2 weeks ago, just reading the news sites, Christian side. There was some pastor who I'm not familiar with. Tragically, he committed suicide. And of course, it was on the Christianity Today or one of them. And of course, I don't know his whole situation. And then the wife said, oh, he struggled with depression, and she didn't realize how bad the depression was. And I realized that sometimes you live under the weight of things that are ordained for you. And it's not always seeking ways out. People say if you don't rightfully deal with what we analyze as depression or things like that, then it's dangerous. But what happens is, then we tell those people or society, okay, you got to seek feeling better, and you got to seek it in a certain way. And then all of a sudden, the self becomes the thing. I was telling one of my friends, Austin, the other day, because some of my friends, I had a few friends this past week who you saw. One of my friends, Furman, he gave me a text like a week ago. And when I seen him, he said, I'm at the end, John. I think he would be okay if I shared this. He said, I am done. He says, what else does God want from me? He says, it's cruel to go through a lot of the struggles he was going through. And he asked me, he said, maybe you have an answer. And I said, I really don't have an answer for you. Because I recognize when you're in that place, you're in that place. Of course, we encourage him in that. But then I seen him yesterday. He was ready to speak. I think he wanted me to do the video. And as he was sitting there, and my friend Crow, and look, Crow and Furman were friends for many years before I knew either of them. And they're kind of part of our fellowship. And then Furman was kind of ready. He said, I feel God's come through for me, John. I think you want to give a testimony. And I prayed for him when he told me how bad he was feeling. And then as he was there sharing, quoting scripture, then he was talking about, he said, and you know, John, and he brought up a few things. And I said, you know, Crow was just asking about that yesterday. And Crow and Furman were both there. He said, you mean he was just asking about what I just taught right now? I said, yeah. Ask him. He said, yeah. And to Furman, he said, isn't that amazing? But I've had a lot of those experiences. God will confirm his word. So this you'll see in the future because I taught a little bit. And of course, that would be the good example. I'll finish this job and I'll get another Wagner spray gun and spray paint that. But I lost zero. It's 5 after 11. I started at 7 o'clock. And I lost not even a minute doing a job that normally, to tear all that down and to prep it, I had to pull all the nails, cleaned it, wiped it down. Normally, you figure that would at least take a few hours out of your schedule. It took nothing. I even did my cleaning. That's amazing. And that's not the first time that has happened, okay? So I'll title this something, Redeeming the Time. God bless everybody.